Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you as well. Welcome to my presentation this afternoon called Self-Regulation Skills in Young Children. And also, I just want to say Happy Nursery Practitioner Day to everybody, because here in the UK, we are celebrating on the 17th of October. So I just want to say thank you, and a huge thank you for everything that everybody does day in, day out for these children, because you know it's such a difference. If we think about those seeds of learning that somebody spoke about earlier, and obviously everybody's presentation so far has also spoken about the child development and brain development, which obviously are really, really critical as well. And so my name's Sue. I am an international early childhood consultant. I've got two Facebook groups. One is called Sue Asquith Early Childhood Consultant, and the other one is called International Early Years Network Quality Matters. You'd be obviously in very good company if you decide to join us there, with lots of international settings there as well. If you want to find out about me later on, or you've got any questions after the conference, my email address is here and my website is here. And this is my book that we've just talked about earlier in terms of, it's called Self-Regulation Skills in Young Children. It's available on Amazon and various other sites. So let's get started. What is self-regulation? Well, it's a hugely complex thing really, but I try to simply describe it as the ability to understand and manage your own energy, emotions, behaviours and attention in a socially acceptable way. Now that might sound something that's quite straightforward. It's actually 4 tiny lines of text here, but it is quite complex really, because if we think about it, for our younger children, it's to be able to manage and understand their own emotions and behaviours. But if we think about it for a moment, the behaviours that we expect of children, perhaps when they're in the classroom indoors, are maybe a different set of behaviours and rules as it would maybe if they were playing outdoors with their friends, where they might be running around a little bit more, or they might be a bit louder maybe with their voices, a bit more exuberant. So if we think about all the different rules, the rules in kindergarten might be different rules to at home, and the rules at home might be different to maybe if the children go to grandparents and things. So just imagine how complex this is to understand how they're feeling, but then remember the different rules for the different contexts and environments that they might be in at the time. Obviously, young babies and young children aren't born with the abilities to self-regulate. They're going to need us as adults to help them to grow these skills. Our babies obviously are born really defenseless. They really need us to be able to do everything for them. They cry, hopefully somebody will go in a reasonable time to be able to say, okay, what is it, what's wrong? Is it your nappy maybe you're tired, maybe you need a milk feed, etc. And we try and work out what the baby's communicating when they're crying, and we try and help them to feel better again quite quickly. When an adult helps a child like this, it's called co-regulation, and the younger children are going to be learning the ability to self-regulate through us helping them with co-regulation. So depending on how old the children are that you're caring for will depend on what we're doing really to help them in an age and stage appropriate way to self-regulation. Once the children are older and they've got some self-regulation skills, they are going to hopefully be able to understand their feelings and emotions. They should be able to hopefully cope with disruptive environments. So if something goes wrong, maybe you're in a group time, a circle time, and it's somebody's turn to talk and somebody else's turn to talk, and then maybe the next person decides not to talk, or maybe they do something silly and inappropriate instead. The next child's got to try and pick up on that and then think, well, this is what I was supposed to be doing, this is what we're talking about, and this is how I'm supposed to forget what's happened and concentrate back on the task in hand. So as children grow, obviously not the youngest children that won't have these skills, but as children grow, hopefully we're growing these skills to enable them to have these skills, to think about what might go wrong if something's disrupted. Think about the impulse control of, I'd really love to go play outside, it's really sunny, but we're going to learn today and have a story first. So they've got to remember and obviously have that impulse control to be able to sit and concentrate before perhaps they can go out to play. And all these skills, hopefully, as we're growing these in early childhood, will hopefully provide a solid base on a foundation of learning and in their brain to help children build some resilience as well. So just thinking about brain development, so the last two speakers, the previous two speakers, talked a little bit about developing the cognitive skills, and obviously there's been some very inspiring videos and information about how we could do that and tap into children's interests. Thinking about the brain development and neuroscience, and just a very quick kind of explanation really as to what happens in our brain. So obviously the brain's a hugely complex organ, but if we think about it in just three levels, so the bottom level here being the brainstem, which is fully developed at birth, and it's responsible for things like controlling our breathing, our temperature, our blood pressure, and all the things we kind of take for granted. It all happens down here. If we think about the middle bit, there's lots of complex names for this. Some people call it the limbic system, some people call it the mammalian brain, but if you don't want to remember or can't remember the fancy names, then maybe we think about the middle bit as being your social brain. So we need everything to be working, happy, comfortable, for your social brain to be happy. And then at the top here, people call it the prefrontal cortex, and all sorts of, again, posh and complex words, but maybe just think about it as your thinking brain. Anything that's new to learn will be firing off a neural connection in your thinking brain. So hopefully today, having listened to the previous speakers and my presentation at the moment, we're thinking about firing new connections off, whether it's new words or new concepts that you've learned. So here we are with our brain. If our social brain isn't happy, if it picks up a little bit of a threat, there's something here in the middle called the amygdala, one in both sides of your head. They pick up the stressors. If you feel stressed, and we'll go on to think about what might cause this soon, but if we're feeling stressed, then this starts to emit cortisol. It starts to pump out cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones, into your brain. What immediately happens if we're not feeling comfortable again straight away is that we lose control of our thinking brain. It shuts down. So we're then only thinking with our social brain, and we've got our fight and flight response at the bottom in the brain stem. If quite quickly, again, it's quite quickly, as if this can happen really, really quickly. If your social brain isn't kept happy and there isn't a very quick response there, then that also shuts down. That leaves us with this brain stem. It leaves us with the oldest bit of our brain, where you might have heard of the fight and flight response. But if we think back to maybe caveman days, maybe if you're thinking about, can I fight that tiger or that bear, or do I need to run away from it? And they are the basic survival instincts, really. And this is what happens when we're stressed. Or for young children, maybe when they don't get their own way, or they feel something's really, really unfair. suddenly the brain starts to shut down and we get this fight and flight response, which obviously sometimes for children means a little bit of a tantrum or a bit of a meltdown, and they tend to start to maybe cry and throw things and shout and things. And this is where when we talk about behaviour, and if we're doing behaviour courses, sometimes we think that these are the behaviours, the unwanted, challenging behaviours maybe that we are seeing in some children here as well. So what we've got to remember is that's a biological response, and if a child has totally lost control, if they do bite you or bite somebody or kick or scream or throw something, then it's a biological response. It's one of that fight and flight response, and it's not something they've chosen to do to hurt you. It's something that's biological response that automatically happens. More familiar possibly to some of you, if you've got your teacher qualifications or maybe some kind of childcare qualification, would be Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And the similar kind of thing here, we need all these layers here to be in place and secure before the children can go on to get to the self-actualization stage at the top of the pyramid here. So very similar really to what I've just been speaking about in the layers of the brain. We need children to be with their physiological responses. We need them to have enough food, water, warmth. If we think about the actual safety, they need to be safe, they need some security, they need some shelter, they need their environments to be physically safe and also emotionally safe. They need that sense of belonging. And then we need to start to build that self-esteem up, and then, only then, can the self-actualization happen. So very similar really to what I've just been talking about with the brain development, but this might be something that you're more familiar with, so you can maybe just cross-reference that information to something that you might be already familiar with. So let's start thinking then, that amygdala, that thing that starts to pick up the stresses in our brain. If we think about what could they be, from an adult, if I had been driving to see you today and to deliver this to a big conference, then maybe if I was running late, maybe there was a traffic jam in front of me and I thought I was going to be late, I might start getting quite cross or agitated. I might get a little bit of road rage and we might be honking our horns and things like that maybe. So those kind of things can obviously maybe start to make our amygdala feel stressed, under stress and under threat. It might be physical pain. I don't know if anybody's ever lived with something like a bad back or something that's causing pain all the time. And pain can make us feel like that as well, because obviously your social brain is not feeling comfortable. And hopefully we've never actually witnessed this or experienced this, but if there's an actual physical threat or an attack, then obviously then your brain is going to start to drop down into fight and flight mode, because your amygdala will be emitting that cortisol. So if we now think about what might this be for children, hopefully not the first three things that I've just spoken about, but maybe something simple as having the wrong coloured plate or cup. So you sat down for snack time or for lunch or dinner, and the child always wants the red cup, and suddenly today they've got the green cup. To us, we think it's okay, the green's nice as well, but for that child, actually the red cup is very, very important. That suddenly starts the social brain feeling very cross, upset, etc. And then the amygdala will start to pump out that cortisol, and something very, very simple but very, very important to the children might then have that child go into meltdown. Maybe for some of the children, not being able to have what they want straight away. We know the younger children have yet to learn about sharing and learn to take turns and things like that. So for a small child around 2 years old, maybe The threat, not the physical threat, but the thing that's making them stressed might be that they want that toy and they don't see the need to wait for it because they haven't yet learnt about sharing it. It could be a certain look. Sometimes I'd use the kind of, not sure if you can see it, the kind of eyebrow look, should we be doing this kind of thing? And I'm not saying that would be a threat, but maybe at home, if they're living in a situation where there's a lot of arguments and things, maybe that just that kind of like a question mark look might make them think of somebody's angry face, and maybe that's put them in a situation where they've perhaps been frightened in the past. And it might be a negative comment about them from an adult or maybe from another child. So when we say these threats, this stress, it doesn't have to be that they're under physical threat. It could be anything that the child feels that's unfair, or it seems to they're not getting their way. It can quite quickly cause this amygdala to start to emit that cortisol out as well. So it's about really knowing our children, isn't it? And really understanding what can get them upset, what they really like, or maybe what they really don't like, because putting in a situation where maybe they don't like a lot of noise, and maybe the noise really hurts their ears, that will also cause that amygdala to start to produce the cortisol, and it'll start the brain to shut down as well. Want us to spend 2 minutes just thinking about dysregulation. Obviously, my talk today is about self-regulation, but what happens when we feel dysregulated? So sometimes we need to think about children. Is it that they can't do something, or is it that they don't want to and won't? So if I can give you an example, I'm claustrophobic, so I don't like being in a busy train. And I don't particularly like elevators and lifts either, especially if there's more than me there. It's the people around me, it's kind of people getting into my personal space, and it gets me very agitated. It doesn't make my husband or my children agitated, so sometimes they don't realise the full extent that that's having on me. And they'll say, "Mum, just get in, it's fine." And I'm thinking, no, actually, it's not fine. And it's not because I don't want to get in the elevator and go somewhere. It's because my body's saying, "No, lady, no, we're not getting in there. There's not enough space." And it's kind of that physical barrier of me getting into the elevator. So I think when we're thinking about the young children, we need to think about, is it that they can't do something? So maybe their bodies are saying that's going to be too noisy, that's going to be too stressful, or is it actually, I don't want to tidy up, so I'm just going to have a little bit of a cry, and I'm going to stamp my feet a bit, and I'm going to see if that will get me out of having to tidy up. There's a big difference there, isn't there? Sometimes I would say, they can't, I actually physically can't do that, is a meltdown, and I'm just going to test the boundaries a little bit just to see, is a tantrum. And I would say there's a difference there. One's they can't and one's they won't. So I think it's really important that when we're thinking about supporting children, that we kind of put themselves in that position. Is it something the child can't do, or is it something they'd rather not do and they're not going to want to do it today? Either way, when this happens, our job as adults is to try and provide some calm. It isn't about adding to that chaos. It isn't about saying, can we sit down and sit and think about this now? Sit on the thinking chair and think about this, because it's making it worse. We need to provide the calm. We need to re-establish that contact with that child and say, I really understand that that made you really, really upset, and try and get them to calm back down again, so that the brain, instead of just being in the fight and flight mode down here, starts to recover, and this emotional brain will kick back in again, and then in time, so will the rational thinking in their thinking brain as well. So when we see something I don't know if anybody's come across the iceberg theory, but if you see something, you tend to see the tantrum, the meltdown, the refusal to do something, them being unkind. Maybe they're in a complete meltdown and they might be on the floor bashing their legs and feet together. They might be crying, they might be biting, hitting, shouting, etc. You're seeing the behaviour, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg. What as practitioners and teachers in early childhood we need to do is think about why is this happening? And it can be through all sorts of different things. And we don't really have time today in this short little session to really unpick what it could be. But there's lots of different things on this screen that it might be. So we see the top of the iceberg, that is the behaviour. Then we need to think about, okay, what's happened for that child? What has been that stressor to get the amygdala to start to pump the cortisol? What started this brain collapse, the amygdala hijack as it's called? Why is this child in fight and flight mode? And again, this is where the key person approach, knowing your individual unique children, will really be beneficial, because you can start to share information with parents, and parents can hopefully share some information with you as well. And then we can start to join those jigsaw puzzle bits up together to get the full picture and to start to understand what the triggers are for some children. If we think about sensory input now, and if this was a bigger session again, maybe we could maybe get more involved. I don't know if you want to get involved in the chat function for me as we go at the moment. But if you think about your sensory input, everybody's sensory input is maybe very unique to them. If this was a Friday afternoon and you were going to go home after this session, if you're thinking about relaxing, you're thinking it's the weekend, are you thinking about going out to a party to unwind and to really, to party? Or you're thinking, wow, that's really been a stressful emotional week, I need to sit and relax? I don't know what kind of person you are, whether you need that input or you want to relax, and there's no single right answer. I don't know if you want to pop some ideas in chat for me and share. If you were going to organise a day trip, would you prefer to go to the seaside or would you prefer to go to the countryside? And again, it's a preference, isn't it? There's no single right answer. If you were going on holiday, would you like to go to a lovely hotel where there's a pool and a sunbed and you lie there and you top your suntan up and you don't move? Or would you prefer to go on an active holiday that was walking and mountain climbing and things instead? And again, it's absolutely, there's no right answer here. It's depending on your sensory input and your sensory preferences. If you were going to play some music, would it be relaxing, spa-like music, maybe quietly in the background, or would it be very upbeat and loud? Lots of different things to think about there, and maybe you're thinking it would depend actually on how I was feeling. And maybe that is the crux of the matter really, is kind of what kind of week you've had and what you're feeling like as well. Just think about how many senses are there. When we were at school, maybe we learned that there were 5 senses. Maybe we learned that about looking at things, smelling things, tasting things, hearing things, and touching things. But actually, if we look into what the occupational therapists are writing about and how they're supporting children, some people will think that actually we've got 8 different senses. And again, don't have much time to talk about all 8 today, but if we think about if everybody's got these different sensory likes and dislikes, party, relax, etc., then there's 8 lots of things that we need to think about for these children. We'll go on to the next page and explore just a little bit of a few of these things rather than thinking about them all. So hopefully you can see this, and I always find it really tricky to show this on a webinar, but we've got 3 glasses here, and I tried to pick glasses that looked similar and hopefully the same size as well, but and as it happens, I do have a glass of water with me, don't always. So my glass is almost, well, it's kind of half empty, half full, isn't it? So in terms of sensory processing, if after I finish speaking to you, I decided to go have an afternoon nap, that maybe would drain my sensory glass down and it would empty it out a bit. If I decided to go for a walk, then maybe there's room to fill my sensory glass up to the top. What we need to understand about children and self-regulation is that we'll be in different parts here. So if this glass was full, totally full, if you tried to get them to do something more active or try to put some music on so there was some information here, or maybe it was snack time and some information was going in for taste, these different sensors, suddenly you're putting more water into the glass. And for some children, if you put too much more in, it'll start to overflow. And these are the children where they might be tactile defensive, they might not like too much sensory input, so you add just a little bit more and actually it's too much. Other children, maybe the ones, if we think about physical, if we think about how physical some children are, maybe their glass is almost empty all the time, and actually to get them to be in a regulated sense, we've got to fill it up quite a lot. So not just a tiny bit to overflow, but actually we've got a lot of filling up to do here. You will probably see children and adults who need a lot of physical input. So sometimes people, I don't have a pen, I do. Sometimes people sit in a meeting and they're going like this with the pen top all the time, or they're messing about with it, or they're doing something, or they're jiggling the foot up and down. These are the people, the children and adults, who need a lot of physical sensations going around their body to be regulated. So we need to be kind of aware really of the ones that are fully regulated already and they've got the senses filled up, and any little bit of something you try to give them is going to be too much information, or the ones that are going to need a lot of filling up so they can just sit down and sit still for 2 minutes, or the ones like myself with the glass I've just shown you that can maybe do either way. They've got some time to actually fill it up, or they've got room to empty it out a little bit. Hopefully in an ideal world we'd all be here all the time with all our 8 senses, but that is going to be very unlikely, and we need to understand children and their senses. Maybe if we do another of these conferences, we'll do one just on sensory, because I could literally talk all day just about this. To make it a little bit more complicated, instead of the glasses or the sensory systems all being the same size, some children might have a tiny, almost like a little shot glass or egg cup sensory system. And that might be, for example, let's say for their hearing. So then some children, if you rang a tambourine or a bell to say it was tidy up time, or played some tidy up time music, they'd be, oh no, it's too much information for my ears, and that would send them into dysregulation, into a sensory meltdown. Other children might have a huge ice bucket full, almost a big receptacle for their noise, and they might go around making lots of noise and shouting and roaring like tigers and things, because actually to them they need a lot of noise to feel regulated. And again, these can be in all 8 senses as well. So hopefully that kind of makes sense a little bit. But we need, for us to be teachers and educators, we need to try and understand a little bit more about what might be this stressor for the children, and understanding about this sensory input is a big part of being able to do that really as well. So, people usually say after a short talk on this, show me some examples, Sue. What can I do to help children in early childhood education centres to be able to do these things? So just a few examples. You've probably got a lot of these things already, but maybe you've got a book I've just used this example, All Kinds of Feelings book, but I've actually got quite a lot of different examples that might also do a similar kind of job, trying to explore the names for our feelings and use them so you can say, wow, children, fantastic, tidying up, you've made me really happy. Or if somebody's having a tricky shit, oh dear, it looks as though you wanted that. Is that making you feel sad? Giving them the words that they might need to be able to understand their emotions. And some children can do this quite quickly, and some children will need a lot of help with them. And maybe if there's a special educational need behind it, some children will probably struggle for a long time, if not ever, to try and manage and talk about their feelings like this as well. But sometimes puppets and soft toys and empathy dolls and things like that sometimes really help us to be able to help children to get these skills. We need our positive relationships. We need our personal, social, emotional skills supported by adults. In England, we use the early years foundation stage, and we talk about that key person approach and how important that key person approach is. So here is me quite a few years ago, and my youngest son, who was actually 18 this weekend, so it's a lot of years ago, maybe 14, 15 years ago. And we'd been on holiday for a short break, and we'd been to Lapland. And Ben had a fantastic time in Lapland. We were very lucky. We went for 4 whole days, but all the holidays that Ben had been on before this were holidays to the sunshine and holidays maybe for 2 weeks. He'd had such a super time. We got back to the airport and he was so sad, didn't want to come home. And I was saying, we've got to come home. Holidays are lovely, but we can't stop on holiday forever. And he said, but nobody told me we were only coming for 4 days. I thought we were coming for weeks. And actually it made me think, even though I worked in childcare and I thought I explained things really, really well, I hadn't told him we were just going for 4 days. So actually he thought we'd got another week maybe, or 10 days to go. And obviously he was really cross and upset with me because he was having such a super time. Then some examples. I don't know if you all use the Colour Monster book. I know that it's very, very popular here in the UK. It's not a book that I've written, and I'm not on commission for selling it at all, but a lot of the nurseries and the kindergartens over here in the UK are using it to help children to understand about their feelings. So every feeling has got a colour, and we're doing all sorts of different things with colours to try and get them to understand or to support their emotions and talking about how we're feeling today. Just an example, you don't have to do it. Yeah, okay, let me see if I can rectify this. Because the photographs aren't going in order, don't know why. Okay, so here we've got that one. Here, under this one, we've got similar kind of things here, but we're going to use maybe one of those pipettes or maybe a little spoon, and we're going to add the colours to the water or to the milk, and to think about how we can change our feelings and how they can maybe be mixed up as well. Here there is an emotions poster, which is usually kind of standard things that we sometimes see in the UK nurseries here. Maybe it's got children on pictures of real children rather than the colour monsters, so that they can maybe see faces, and usually then they might put their name in a basket, or they might put the name under that feeling so that they can self-register on a morning maybe and think about their feelings and emotions, how they're feeling. And during the daytime, if they start to feel sleepy or cross or hungry or what have you, they can go and move their name to the corresponding thing that they are wanting, feeling. Here is a similar kind of thing, but this obviously poster here is here, and this is a bigger environment. So actually, if they are feeling a bit dysregulated and they need maybe to calm down, then they can go sit on these cushions. The cushions are all different textures depending on what the children might favour, and there's lots of different books and things here, and maybe a teacher would come and help them with that as well. So lots of different examples there, and just various different examples really there of how we can perhaps support. And this last one here is coloured spaghetti, and obviously thinking about feelings as well. What I did see once in a nursery a couple of months ago is that they'd used maybe like an empty water bottle. They'd filled it with water and baby oil, and also some colours, so that the colour would actually all go down to the bottom and the oil would float to the top. And then with red being angry, for example, they could swirl the bottle round and all the red would go into the whole bottle, and then they could say to the children, this is what we feel like when we're feeling cross or feeling angry, but actually can you see already, children, that this is starting to settle back down again? And it's a really good visual. I thought it was really, really useful, especially for young children, to be able to see that.